Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
I have struggled with suicidal ideation and thoughts for a very long time. Got probably at its worst in college for the most part. If I was able to, this is very dark, but if I was able to just survive the night, I knew that I would be okay.
Hello and welcome to Seven on Sundays, the podcast about how young adults are navigating sex, relationships, and life today.
We are your hosts, Dr. Chez, Leeby, and Stephanie Boye. And each week we will share our candid conversations with young adults and experts about today's tough topics. Belle, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Seven on Sundays.
Thank you for having me.
We would love for you to dive into this big topic called depression and tell us from your experience what depression is like, what it feels like, or anything about your story of how that all is for you and went for you.
So I have dealt with depression for much of my life, but I wanted to mostly focus on my college experience because I know that in my personal experience, I saw a lot of my friends go through it for the first time. And a lot of them didn't even know what was happening to them. They would call me and say, I'm feeling this way and I don't know what's happening. I'm like, well, that sounds a lot like when I was depressed. So I first started struggling with it when I was pretty young. It runs in my family. So luckily, my family was able to recognize the signs, and I've been dealing with it on and off since. I have just recently actually figured out the things that work for me, but college was pretty tough on my mental health. I knew going in that it was something I was going to have to watch out for, but I found myself getting very depressed very early on. And as for how it feels, I always describe it as everything is just colorless. A lot of people will look at depression and say oh, she's just laying in bed all day. She's just lazy. When really the reality is that even just opening your eyes in the morning is exhausting. The act of being awake is exhausting. And how can you do anything when just living is exhausting? And a lot of people don't understand how hard that can be to live with. A lot of times it can really be stigmatized as people just excusing laziness. And I internalized that message a lot when I was younger. But it took a long time for me to realize, no, I'm fighting against a weight. I'm trying to swim, and everybody else around me is treading water just fine. And for some reason, I'm sinking. I thought it was just because I was a bad swimmer, but I really just had 20-pound weights attached to my ankles, and it's much harder to stay afloat. And sometimes your arms just get more tired. And I notice a lot of my friends not being able to wake up in the morning and not going to class and eating too much or not eating enough. And they would just say, I'm just so tired all the time. I'm just so tired all the time. And I can't focus. I can't do this. And it's not even that they want to lay in bed and do nothing. It's just that that's all they can do. That's all you can do when you're depressed. It's so hard to see the other side of it when you're depressed. And it's so hard. People are oh, just be happy. And it's hard to even imagine a world in which you can be happy or in which you were happy. I remember I would do fun things, and then an hour later I would come home and the depression would really hit. And I'd be I've never had fun in my entire life. I was just having fun an hour ago, but I can't remember that feeling of joy when I'm in darkness. And when I first got to college, I didn't really know. I'd been handling it, but it was different at school. And I started using some unhealthy coping mechanisms that I recognized in a lot of my friends.
So first, let me just say really quickly, thank you so much for sharing this. This is very hard to hear as a parent, to know that you would be going through something like this. So I'm really grateful for your candor and your honesty about, that's shocking to me that 20 minutes later you would feel like you never had fun in your life.
it's weird coming out of it too, because you're like, how is that possible? I know I was just having fun. Logically, you can see around this. Sometimes the logical part just doesn't even work, but logically you can see around it. But in the moment, you're like, I've never had fun in my life, and I never will have fun in my life again. It doesn't matter when I did an hour ago. It doesn't matter what I will do in an hour, because right now I'm just in this pit of joylessness. So I started using some pretty unhealthy coping mechanisms. I was feeling really lonely, and a really big trigger for my depression is a feeling of loneliness. Whether or not I'm actually lonely, it's that feeling of loneliness triggers me pretty badly. So I used alcohol. I used weed on occasion. And there was a little while there where I was using casual sex in the media. I mean, you hear all these songs and you see all these videos that casual sex is empowering for women. And I think it's different for everybody. I know for me, I was having casual sex, and then afterwards I would feel terrible. And I'm like, this is supposed to make me feel great. I'm supposed to feel great. Why am I feeling terrible? Like, I thought this was going to be a great thing. What's wrong with me? Like, and I would drink too much or I would smoke. It was all just a mechanism of dulling the sense of doom that I lived in.
Belle, your analogies are so powerful. Dulling the doom and the swimming analogy is so helpful for people to understand the depths of despair that this feels like. So again, yes, thank you so much. And you've obviously thought about this, or you've got a conceptualization of it as almost like an outsider now to it, which is interesting and really powerful, because then you know the that and the me, which are two different things. You know, you are not that, but you know that, and you have conceptualized it in a really powerful way. So first of all, thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, does the feeling, because this is confusing for people, so I love your clarity. Does the feeling feel more numb than it does sad? Because people think depression is sad, but I hear a lot of times that it's just almost like a void numb of like nothing.
It's hard. I would say both, because there is a sense of, I would say in general, it's more of a numbness, but it's not just like, it's not a lack of feeling. It's more so a lack of good feelings, I would say, because you still have those overwhelming feelings of despair. And that certainly is not numb. In those moments, I would love to feel numb, hence the drinking and the smoking. It's more of a numbness to joy.
Yeah. So when you said you noticed this in other college students, what would they, call you to say? What are they experiencing that they're like, what's going on with me? Is it's that tiredness and I can't get up and I can't experience joy?
Yeah, I would notice it sometimes in friends who called me specifically about it. I would also sometimes notice it in friends who didn't think it was a problem, but were constantly drinking. And the second something got a little bit too real, they would just drink more. It was a lot of that deep rooted just exhaustion and a feeling like a lack of purpose, a lack of reason to wake up in the morning. That is something that I hear a lot and I have experienced a lot, where it's like, I don't want to get out of bed because there's nothing worth getting out of bed for. There's nothing that will make my day better. Nothing will make my day good. So there's nothing worth getting out of bed for. And sometimes you don't realize that that's what's happening. You go from being a person who wakes up at 7:30 a.m. to somebody who's waking up at 3 just to have coffee and go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Wow, Belle. So, what I think is great is that you're telling us, because your family was able to recognize the signs of depression because it was in your family, they were able to get you help early, which seems to be not
Yes.
only a blessing for you, but also a blessing for your friends that you encountered in school that weren't able to see those things.
Yes, I was very blessed in that way.
So, my question is, you had said that a lot of people experience this for the first time when they went to college. Do you have any insight as to why you think that this stuff comes about in college versus before that?
I think obviously it's different for everybody. For a lot of people, it's the feeling of loneliness. You're in a new place. You're used to having kind of your core group growing up all throughout life. And I mean, as kids, we're basically friends, like our parents' kids, and you're always around people. In college, if you don't put yourself out there, you could easily stay in your dorm and just be lonely. I know people who did that. You have to make an effort. And for a lot of people, that loneliness was a completely new feeling for them. I know for a lot of people, the academics kind of hit them like a brick. They didn't really know what was coming. I know personally, I have a couple friends who got on birth control for the first time, and that just completely whacked out their hormones. I know some people that not having somebody to control their routine, not having their parents to control their routines, had them just completely fall off. It was more of a what came first, chicken or the egg? What came first, them being depressed or them drinking and sleeping in and not doing anything and then feeling worthless and then becoming depressed?
This is all incredibly insightful. And I have to tell you, we have touched on this in different episodes about loneliness in college, but it is a huge issue. It is a huge issue that I think we don't talk about enough. And I love that you said that you've seen several reasons why people tend to get into this. And it seems like you have some insight as to how to sort of escape that loop, if you will, or that fate. And I know it's not always, sunshine and roses. This is obviously it's a change in your life. It does provoke anxiety, but I love that you said that you have to get involved and you have to do things. I mean, having two kids that went to college, I can tell you it is like what I pushed and pushed and pushed for, and I don't know that they actually did what I said. Like my daughter didn't do it until she went through during COVID, but she didn't do it really until like end of sophomore year. My son is now a sophomore, second semester. And I think he's more like, okay, I have to start to do this. But that is a huge thing. I don't know how, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how we get kids to get engaged before that because I think you're right. That is a huge part of it. You're always surrounded by people at home.
I think I want to say a couple things about the loneliness thing and the fact that how this gets more vocalized, I think, in college life. And I think you are so insightful about these issues. And we can add to those like sleep patterns are different, exercise and like sports
Food,
patterns might be different. Like
nutrition.
food is different, in college. Like so there's so many added factors that might weigh into it. But if we believe the research, which I think it's underreported, but if we believe the research, in 2022, 44% of high school students said they felt severely depressed for like 2 weeks straight or something was the words. And so I think high school has it too, but it's different in college because maybe you can't hide from it, but also you're not doing all those activities like you're saying. So you're not as lonely and you're a little more active. So it's maybe hidden a little more, but it's still there, I think. I think it may become more manifest when you're on your own because like you said, you're not doing your schedule and all those things. So it's a little more obvious. But I do think it's there. But also the point of that you were talking about the loneliness, I mean, the Surgeon General declared nationally that we're in an epidemic of loneliness. So loneliness is such a key factor. And when I talk to kids that are suicidal, those are the words I hear of I'm all alone, nobody understands, all those kind of words. And so you saying those words that's what was a trigger for you, just saying that out loud and to recognize that helps people know that they're not alone in their loneliness. You're not alone in feeling alone because it's an epidemic now and we need help with that. And so yes, we're getting to what can help with that, but it's a very big topic and the rates of
And
suicide are scary. So we need these kind of conversations.
And the other thing that I think people don't realize, it is very easy to be lonely when you are surrounded by people. My generation got hit really hard with that because of social media. I mean, I would just go online and see people surrounded by people and be like, I'm the only person who feels this way. I'm the only person who's lonely. And then I would actually talk to some of them and they all felt lonely. And I mean, I was posting photos of me with other people on social media. For my social media, you would have no idea.
to add to what both of you have said about why it becomes more epidemic in college, I think also because the coping mechanisms that the media messaging is that hookups will make you feel better, that casual sex is exciting and all of that kind of stuff, and alcohol and drugs, and people are like, you see Miley Cyrus, and it's like Molly becomes a big thing, and it's like people go like, oh, these are the things that people who are happy are doing, and that messaging is literally just driving the epidemic further.
With hookup culture specifically, it makes you, by nature, it's going to make you more lonely. You're going to have sex with them and then they're going to leave and you're going to be alone again. You would think that it's like empowering and it just makes you feel more lonely.
My son told me, mom, freshman year, I went out to bars and I made all these friends. And by the end of freshman year, I was like, yeah, I don't really like that person. But you have this feeling of like, oh, these people are great. I'm having the best time of my life. And then you realize they're not actually really friends.
That was what I meant about like you can still feel lonely surrounded by people. Yeah, they're not the people that like quality and add to your life. Or if the only activities you do with them are draining, it won't actually help the problem.
I mean,
Right.
all of those things that you mentioned or that we talked about, drugs, alcohol, sex, I mean, out of context of a healthy way of drinking, or I mean, I don't know what the health, I mean, sure, there are people who smoke weed to deal with pain and things like that, but outside of like measured forays into alcohol or drugs and not casual sex, because I don't know anybody that feels good by just giving their body to someone and then that person not even wanting anything in response. That's just a momentary band-aid fix that is not going to solve anything,
Yeah, and ignoring them the next day. That's what we
which
do
is even worse. You would
which
have
is
been
even
better off
worse.
not
Yeah,
having this situation to begin with.
right. What is your experience with hookup culture? Because we talk a lot about that. How does that add to
Mhm.
depression? Like, what more about that? Because it's so a part of, unfortunately, your generation, and like you said, it's like there are these empowerment messages. So how confusing is all that stuff? I'm an empowered woman. I'm gonna own it and be my sexual self, and then it ends up being this hookup thing, and then where does that leave you?
Yeah, I definitely want to start and say like I believe that women should do whatever they want. I think the problem is that for a lot of people it makes them feel worse. But I absolutely believe that like women, I believe in sexual empowerment. It's a hard line to walk, but I know from my personal experience and from other people I've spoken to, I was using sex and male attention as a validation. I thought that it was going to make me feel better about myself because they were making me feel beautiful and wanted. And for a minute, that made me feel a lot better. It made me feel beautiful and wanted. And I mean, all the time, it's like a ton of the media now is about like hookup culture and it's empowering for women to sleep with who they want. And for some people, it might be, but for me, it would give me that momentary high of like, oh, they want me. And then the hole that it left would just be so much bigger than what it started with. Cause it just made, I was completely alone and I almost felt used or cheated in a way that like this thing is supposed to make me feel better. And this thing is supposed to be what strong women do. And I just feel awful. Like I just feel completely unwanted now. And it never fulfilled me in the way that I hoped or expected it would. And it's an easy path to fall down because I thought, well, maybe it was just bad sex. Maybe if I have sex with more people, it'd be better. It was not good for me at all.
I agree with you on people. There should be no shame surrounding sex, the sex that you have. I'm all
Mhm.
for, but I want to just say one thing here because we're talking about college students. And most people, we were talking about this earlier about friends with benefits. And if you don't understand what a healthy relationship is, if you're not in a good frame of mind, if you're mentally not healthy, casual sex is never going to make you feel good. I don't care what anyone says.
Yep.
Yes, you should never feel shame about the things that you do, but that is not the antidote to an unhealthy mental state, nor drugs, nor alcohol. So, yes, if you are
Mhm.
in a healthy mental state, if you know what you're getting from a relationship, if there are established boundaries and consent, there's no shame. There's no shame, period. But there's no negative impact from the choices that you're making. And it's not about shame or feeling bad or feeling good. It's about what makes us healthier human beings. And I just think, especially by what the Surgeon General says about the rates of depression, about what casual sex looks like, that I've heard from literally hundreds of students, that it is not the answer to the loneliness, to the getting the relationship, to the helping you feel better. So there's a difference, I
Definitely.
think.
But then the question becomes, how do we bypass culture to get these meaningful, non-lonely connections that are not through social media, that are through live interactions, that are not through casual sex? Like, that's what's really the ding, 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 like $20 million question. But did you get to a point where you were feeling suicidal, like it got that down that deep hole of, not only do I not want to get out of bed, but I don't know that I want to live? And again, you can answer or not answer, because I'm going to ask you another question too. And then maybe to help us, tell us what did work for you with turning this around. And I say the deep dark hole because there are a lot of parents and kids that don't realize how quickly it can go down that hole and then stay there, and how hard it is to pull out. Anybody that can pull themselves out of that, I don't care how, what, when, where, why, like, amen, alleluia, so proud of you. Kudos to you, because anybody that can, I know the depths of that are really hard if you did. So just saying that out loud, because a lot of, unfortunately, my brother committed suicide when he was 18 and he was in college, and he couldn't get himself out of that hole, which is why I became a therapist. And then I hear from a lot of other parents and kids that have parents that have lost kids, or kids that, have gone down that hole, of how hard it is to pull themselves out.
Yeah. I have struggled with suicidal ideation and thoughts for a very, very long time. Got probably at its worst in college for the most part. If I was able to, this is very dark, but if I was able to just like survive the night, I knew that I would be okay. Like, and I do know that this can happen to some other people. I've seen it as well.
Can I stop you there? Because I am chills head to toe. This is so important. This is so important. I do feel like when you're in that deep hole, it's really hard to say those words. If I can survive the night, I'll be okay. Or if I can survive the next hour, I'll be okay. Or if I can survive the next 10 minutes, I'll be okay. And that's what it takes. I'm literally like head to toe in chills. And that's what makes me think this is really important, because that's what it takes, is kind of tricking the mind almost to be like, okay, if I can get through this, and I can, and to say that to yourself, then I will be okay. And it may come back in different formats, but that's a really important thing. The permanence of suicide means I didn't get the chance to get through something, to get through it for the next day, because it's a permanent solution to maybe a temporary problem, or definitely a temporary situation. It doesn't have to be forever. But anyway, thank you for saying those words, because that's a really important thing. And maybe you can say it again.
I think because I've dealt with it for so long, I do know that I will always come out the other side. And for a lot of people, when this is their first time dealing with depression and feeling this way, they don't know that they're going to come out the other side. I mean, I've done it for so long. I know that no matter how bad it is, still going to wake up the next morning. The sun is still going to rise. And I just need to get through this feeling. I just need to survive it. And then I will maybe not be okay, but I'll be here. And that's a good place to start.
Belle, it sounds to me like you are very emotional having this conversation, and I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to share this with us. And I know from personal experience with people close to me that their children have felt suicidal. So as a parent and as somebody who could advise my children, how do how do we best help, and Dr. Shez, feel free to jump in. How do we best help someone who we see is feeling this way? What can we do?
From my experience, that was the other thing I was going to say, is sometimes in those moments, I don't feel like my life is worth living, and it would be on a personal level, I just didn't see it. Like, I saw no worth. The things that would keep me there is I know that it would devastate my parents. Like, I know that it would absolutely break my parents if I told myself. And sometimes that was the only thing that was keeping me here, but it was strong enough that it worked. And just letting them know that, like, there's always a place to come back to. There's always somebody to talk to, because as hard as it is to reach out to people in those moments, it is the most effective way of getting through it. Like, it is the connection, even though it's the time when you want it the least, it's when you need it the most. Reaching out to other people is a saving grace many times.
How can your parents, like, is it literally sitting on the phone with your child, sitting on the phone with your friend, even if nothing is being discussed? Like,
Yep.
I'm just thinking, I'm
Just
a parent, I see this in my child. They're in college. How do I help from 1,600 miles away?
If it's really bad, you try and get there. For the most part, though, I mean, especially in the good moments, just make sure they know. My therapist actually had me make a plan for, like, if I'm feeling suicidal, this is my plan. This is what I will do to make sure that I don't do that. And my plan was to reach out to somebody. And my parents have always expressed to me how much they love me and how much my life means to them. Even in the moments it doesn't mean anything to me, I know that it means something to other people. And just making sure that the people you love know how much you love them and know how much you mean to them, and that they will be missed. Like, they will. A lot of times when you're depressed, you feel like you have no purpose. And sometimes just knowing that, like, somebody sees a purpose in me, I can be there for them.
I am so grateful that you just said that. I think that is a key. Like, I don't know if every therapist has people do that, but I think making that
Yeah.
plan, because, we often hear about suicidal plans, but to make the plan in case you feel that way, that's the opposite trajectory, is huge.
Mhm.
Who can I call? Even letting your parents know you're on my list. If I call you, no matter what. But I agree with you. Like, I am always like, to my kids, go make the world a better place. I love you. I'm so proud of you. I'm here for you. Like, your life is so important to me. And I think parents need to hear that. You can never say that enough, I'm assuming.
And I want to
Yeah.
say this too, that it doesn't have to be just a therapist. I mean, that would be beautiful because therapists are trained to do that work. But if you are a friend or a parent that can say, okay, what are 3 things you can do when you feel this way? And I don't know if you use the suicide hotline at all, Belle, but I feel like, those people are trained as kind of peer, mentors and coaches or whatever to kind of help people in the moment 24 hours a day, which is wonderful. No matter what your relationship is with somebody, making sure that they have some kind of healthy coping mechanism in place when that happens is really helpful, and more than
Mhm.
one. Like, you don't want to just have one because it might not be available in the moment, but having, several people on the list to call or several coping strategies for what you can do,
Mhm.
that's super helpful.
Because when you're in that moment, like, going on a walk is not possible. Like, that is way too much effort for when you're that bad. But, like, I have a playlist on my phone of TikToks that make me smile. And, like, if I'm feeling really bad, even if they don't make me smile when I'm that low, I know that, like, they will, in the back of my mind somewhere, just tickle, like, that little happiness nerve. And I can just go through those videos. And every time I see a video on TikTok, I save it if it makes me smile. And that way I know that if somebody's not answering or something, I have that little happiness distraction.
I love that.
That is
And
amazing.
that's a crucial point too, Belle, is that you need things that are available at 3 in the morning. Going for a walk is
Mhm.
not possible at 3 in the morning. You need your set of things that is available at 3 in the morning. And if it's a playlist of TikTok videos that are available to you to replay at 3 in the morning, perfect. Because you can't say when, what, where, this is going to happen. So you need these things to be available at any time, which is great.
Mhm.
Okay, I'd love to hear more about your other therapeutic kind of tools that have helped you. And, your work with your therapist sounds like that person has been really a positive, good impact in your life. And there's so many people that have a stigma about therapy, like it doesn't work or nobody will understand or all those things. So I'd love to hear your take on all of that.
Can I just say before you say anything,
Yes.
Belle, it's not just that people have a stigma about it doesn't work. I think people have a stigma in general when you say you have a mental health issue. And I think
Right.
we have to destigmatize all of that, not just what the therapist can do, but the fact that your parents, going back to it, the fact that your parents recognized it and were able to do intervention earlier helped you to be more keenly aware when you were alone and by yourself. So if
Mhm.
more parents had less stigmas around mental health, they might be able to say, hey, to their child, you need some sort of therapy. All of us need therapy. All of
Yep.
us could benefit from understanding tools. Like I know I'm just going to throw it out there, like DBT for people who struggle with suicidal ideation, DBT skills. You can get a DBT workbook and it has a list of skills that you can go through, and they're very helpful in the moment when you might not have anyone else, but putting cold water on your neck or on your face, and all of these things. But I just think we need to remove stigma altogether and recognize when we see things, not to be afraid to get our child help.
Thank you for saying that, Steph. That's huge. And that does have to be backstepped to first the stigma to mental health, because I can't tell you how many parents who've lost children say, but he was like the funny guy, the happy guy, whatever, because it's hidden, because there is this stigma that I don't want anybody to know because of social media, because of what I'm supposed to be or who I'm supposed to look like and be this happy person. And so you're right. I think destigmatizing the fact that we all have all feelings, including suicidal ideation. There are, a higher majority of people who have felt like, oh my God, I don't know that life's worth living versus not. Like that too needs to not be this thing that's just somebody else over there. And oh no, not me. So anyway, so thank you for helping us with destigmatizing these kind of things for sure.
I love therapy. I think that everybody needs a therapist. I very openly talk about therapy. I actually try and make it a goal to very openly talk about my mental health in general, because I always hope that maybe there is a reason I went through it, and I kind of got a little bit of a reason in college, like the reason, like me going through it, and I was able to help a lot of my friends going through it. But yeah, I love therapy. I always joke that if I ever have a kid, like 10 years old, therapist. Family therapy is so important, learning how to properly communicate with the people around you. So yeah, I super highly recommend therapy to anybody who has access to it. I love that it's becoming more accessible. Anything that you can do to help yourself. You will always be in a better place than you started. Even if you feel like it didn't help, you will always end up at a slightly better point than you started.
We interviewed a girl, and I'm just curious if you feel the same way. We interviewed a girl who struggled with anxiety her whole life, and she was able to recognize when you help your children to recognize emotions, to call them out, to see what's healthy, what's unhealthy, which they would learn through a therapist, or I don't know, I would hate to recommend parents, but like through like a deep understanding of how our brain works and stuff. She understood what anxiety felt like in her body, and then when she got to college, she could recognize what was amping it up and what was bringing it down. So, the fact that people have, like, depression in college is probably not really the case, that they just have it in college. Maybe they do, but it probably was always underlying a little bit, but covered over by, "Oh, we have all these family events to do. I'm never alone. I have my cats. I have my bedroom. All of that is my safe space." And then everything is turned into a washing machine, and it's mixed up, and none of those things are there, and so the real underlying issues come out.
Absolutely. Yes. And you bring up another great point too, that when she was talking about having anxiety, or other guest having anxiety her whole life and recognizing feelings, it's really important to not use the words unhealthy or healthy feelings. And I'm not calling you out, Steph. I'm just saying this is where we get stuck, because this is what society does. All feelings are healthy and all are normal. It's all how we respond and deal with them, because they're all a part of the program. Like, we can't not have quote unquote unhealthy feelings. They're all there. They are there, and they're going to be there in different circumstances, but it's how we manage them and how we are awake to them, allow them, and then manage them.
I love
So
that.
in the
You're so right.
Okay, not to call you out, 'cause you know I love you.
No, no, no.
This is what we do. Like, this is, and I do it too. I am just as guilty for putting things in categories. And I think this is where we're shifting the mindset and shifting the mindset that all feelings are human and we need to accept that. Even I want to kill myself. That is a normal, in some cases, a normal response to despair and depression and different things. So, we'd have to know how to manage those things and what to do with them. In the few minutes that we have left, because I know you have to get to a class, Bell, what are some other things that were helpful to you in terms of therapy? Did you ever do DBT? Do you know what Steph's talking about?
I do know what she's talking about, but no, I never did it. I just do talk therapy and then I did EMDR for a little while. But that was good. It didn't work as well for me, but I think it's because I wasn't in the right headspace for it.
You may not have trauma that needs the emotional reprocessing, like, that may not be what I mean, I think we all have trauma is my belief, but
Mhm.
it may not be that that's where you were and what you needed at the time, but if the talk therapy and the concrete planning and her giving you tools, what can you name for us, like, 3 other tools that were helpful for you?
For like an actual plan if I was feeling bad or just in general.
Either or, whatever was helpful for you.
Though the most helpful thing in my depression has actually been making a routine and sticking with it. Just the act of waking up early, even if it feels awful, it makes me feel like I did something. So I have become really strict about my routines and really protective over my routines. I wake up at the same time every day. I go for a walk every morning. The sunlight exposure has been really, really great for me. I journal twice a day, every day. I have been working a lot on my inner self talk, which has been something that's been going on for a long time with me in therapy. Have always been very, very mean to myself. And it's hard to feel like anything in the world is good if my own brain is being mean to me constantly. So I have tried really hard recently to reprogram the way I speak to myself. I do my daily affirmations. I've been working out. I found a way of working out that I enjoy because forcing myself to do something I didn't enjoy never worked. It never does. Yeah, I have been trying to limit my screen time.
Belle, this is an amazing list of things. Imagine if we all did these things every day. We're going to recap this in the notes, but these are the things that for our overall mental health, never mind depression, but any issue we're dealing with, if we proactively take care of ourselves in this way, these are self-nurturing tools. And you're also talking, about catching your thoughts and really changing those. But if we did that on a regular basis, the world would be totally different. So you're a great role model for these kind of things, and I appreciate you sharing them in this way. I think this is going to be so helpful for other kids your age and for parents.
Yay, I'm happy to hear that.
I just want to say one thing in closing for me is that I think what is also really important for parents, and maybe Belle, you can talk on this. What is really important for I think parents to understand is that just because you think someone won't commit suicide because they've said that to you, young children and young teenagers, before your brain is fully formed, they do act a lot on impulse. And even though suicide may not have been their goal, sometimes they have very maladaptive behaviors that will take their life, even if that wasn't the goal, whether that's drugs, overdosing on pills, cutting, things like that can actually be life taking. And so we have to take all of it seriously, no matter how small the indication is that somebody is doing something to self harm. Eating disorders, Dr. Shez, I know we talked about that before, but like all of these things show maladaptive behaviors that can end up taking the life of someone who maybe unconsciously is depressed, like consciously depressed, but unconsciously doing these behaviors, and it ends up taking their life.
Don't be scared of making your kid angry if it means saving their lives. I know several people that I went to school with that needed treatment and weren't getting it because their parents didn't want to upset them. And it's like, well, they might be upset with you, but they won't be dying of an overdose. So pick which one you would rather have. I think we all know the right answer there.
Belle, that is incredibly important. And I want to make sure parents hear that in a big way. So we're also going to put that in the notes and some other signs and things to really pay attention to and not take lightly. And the suicide hotline numbers, we're going to have all that in our notes as well. But yes, this is a really important piece today on prevention for sure. And I want to say to you, Belle, you mentioned in the beginning about swimming with 20-pound weights. And I just want to honor you as a literal, like, Olympic swimmer that you are. Like, you are truly an Olympian in that regard. So, and I say that to everyone that has even made it another day. Like that, I know that is really, really hard. So thank you so much for sharing this and for sharing your Olympic skills, because you're a winner.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great job. I'm so glad that you made it through and that you have great skills. But Dr. Chez is right. That's just something really impressive.
And yeah, your parents, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And your friends, friends, parents, the whole circle. So all of this is important. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today, Belle.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Chez Leeby and Stephanie Boye based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guest that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7onsundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.